I'm here. Good morning. Good morning, Stephanie. This is Tobias, and I realized that we had a appointment to talk about your thoughts about the current situation with the volatile American political scene that is likely to erupt into something quite obscene. And so I'd like to introduce you to my good friend, Michael, who says that he came back because Gabriel asked him to explain something to you, if you don't mind. Sure. Hi, Michael. Nice to see you again. Thank you for hear from you again. Each day I say to myself, well, here I am today in the world of gadabout energy because I walk around and I listen to people and I say, well, this is the way they play in the world of gadabout energy. And you say, well, they play in a kind of destructive way because they trust on so much hatred and anger, Michael, that I don't know how it can help but explode in a gush of lava that will burn everything in its path. And I say to you, Stephanie, that this is the way that the earth releases its energy, you see. It releases its tendency to be cool on the outside and hot on the inside, you see. And so those people who are very cool on the outside and hot on the inside are the ones who are full of molten rocks. And occasionally the rocks will cool and they will cause them to have a thick crust. And the thick crust will be their inability to see reality because that's all they are. They're just molten rocks and cool rocks. And so they don't have any clocks that regulate their ability to live in a world of reality. They do not live in a world that unfurls in a happy way because they have to stay either in a frozen crust or in a molten way. And so, periodically, as you say, all of this anger and frustration and hatred will erupt in a big blast of energy that will blow the crust away. Once it blows the crust away, they have no control anymore. You see, they have no control of their own actions. And this is how, as you say, the Hutus could attack the Tutsis and blow them away without a thought of their humanity. They had no control anymore. They had no control. And the Nazis who slaughtered so many people had no control. You see, they had no control. They were out of control because their control buttons were never there to begin with. They never had any control of their own soul energy because they just blew hot and cold. And so, for example, the people who come to say something critical about your channel on YouTube, that you are a fraud, that you can't possibly be talking to me or God or others you see, are blowing cold. They're blowing cold air because they're trying to freeze others out, you see. They're trying to freeze the ones who don't please their handlers, you see. And so they are handled by others, you see. They have no self control. They only are controlled by the ones who know how to control them, you see. And the ones who know how to control them only know how to control them because they learned to use others as their appendages, you see. So Trump uses his supporters as their appendages. And Trump is used by others, you see, who use him as one of their appendages. So they are like a massive blob of destructive energy. And once the cover blows off, they have no control, you see, because there is no stop gap. There is no gap between them, you see. It is like saying there is no fire break. The fires that blow will consume everything in their path. Everything. It will consume them, of course, but it will consume everything in their path, for they're like a torch that will torch everything good and holy, you might say. And this is because they have no self control. And so they will boil over in a hot mess. And God is aware of this. God is aware of the ones who have no control, you see. They have no self control. And he says, well, they blow hot and cold because they can't mix their energy. They cannot mix their energy. It's like saying that they have a hot faucet and a cold faucet, but the two are not connected in a way that they can spew warm water. They can't be warm, you see. They have no way to mix hot and cold except through the explosive energy that will blow their tops, you see, and cause them to lose all control. And then they will storm the Capitol, or they will run around with their machetes and kill everything in their path. That is not part of the ones who blow hot and cold, and maybe sometimes they'll even get a few of those. But mostly they try to destroy the ones who are warm, you see. They try to destroy the warm bodies because the warm bodies remind them that they are inadequate. They are simply inadequate. They cannot control themselves, you see, because they have to be controlled. They are very robotic in the way that they function, but the robots do not have a way to protect themselves from the messages they receive, from the darkness they perceive all around them. They live in darkness. And so, as you say, this darkness is the trust on an anger and a hostility that is so great, you see, that it is about to erupt in a very, very, very painful event for the USA. When it's over and they have expended all their molten lava, you might say, and the mountain cools, and the rocks cool and become those volcanic rocks that are strewn down the mountainside, then there will be a period of peace when the warm-blooded animals can live in harmony with each other and with their world, you see. But the ones who have no self-control will continue to smolder within themselves, you see, and they will continue to smolder until the energy becomes so great that they will explode in a bloodbath because they are full of so much anger that they just see red. All they see is red when they head out to destroy all the ones who are warm-blooded, you see. And so, what does this mean for humanity? What it means for humanity is that the Trump followers are hot and cold. They are cold to the touch because they cannot reflect any heat, you see. They cannot reflect any heat because they're just cold rocks that have accumulated on top of the molten core. And when the pressure gets to be enough, they will explode and it will be a bloodbath. Wait and see. It will be a bloodbath. And this is something they can't understand because they don't have the ability to understand reality. They do not have the ability to understand mythology. They do not have the ability to understand metaphor. They do not have the ability to understand illusions and allusions to something that is not physical, you see. They only trust on hot and cold. They only trust on the earth, you see, that the earth will explode one day and destroy them. They are like the dinosaurs, you see, that did not grow enough to know how to self-regulate. And although the dinosaurs, as you know, did not die because of a meteor, because the meteor that fell did not spell doom for them. They died because they had no self-control, and they ate everything in their path, and eventually they even ate their young. And this is what the Trump followers are doing. They are eating their young, you see. They are eating their young. This is reality. They are destroying their country, their freedom, and their world in order to make sure that no one survives. And they don't care if anyone survives because their hunger for release from their misery is so great. They are hungry for release from their misery, and so they have sent up their cries and said, "We are so miserable because of all this molten anger inside of us, and because we live in darkness, you see. We are miserable. Can you relieve us of our misery?" And God says, "Well, you have asked me to relieve you of your misery. And the only way I can see to relieve you of your misery is to get rid of you so that you no longer eat your young. Because if you eat your young, then you're getting rid of yourself, you see. You are destroying your own access to reality. And so, when the dinosaurs ate their own young because they had devoured all the herbivores you see, then they destroyed themselves. And so this is a way for them to destroy themselves because God is not here to destroy you. God is here to love you and to give you whatever it is you ask because God's task is to supply all his children with their needs, you see. And if your misery is so great because of the hatred inside of you, then it will eat you alive. It will eat you alive. And it will cause you to be exposed to reality. Because the reality is all that molten lava inside will explode out. And you will become the one who burns everything in your path. You will become the one who destroys anything that moves if it reminds you of your inferiority, that you are not capable of mixing hot and cold and getting warm. You just can't get warm anyway. You see it? And so eventually it turns to molten lava, you see? So now let's back up a bit and look at this from a different point of view. Okay? Okay. This reminds me of the build up to World War II and how the young people, well, I did and Bettina did say, how is it that all this was going on? We were just kids, basically, because we were teenagers still when the invasion came. How is it that all this buildup came and nobody saw it, nobody stopped it? So it's the same thing going on in the USA. You can just see all the buildup of hatred and explosive energy, and it's building up to a tinderbox status that I see and that's been shown to me. I look at these posts that people make on Facebook after Trump's conviction, where I'm still a Trump girl, still a patriot. I still am here for the USA, or, etc. kind of things. And I think, what is this insanity? It's just insanity. Yes, it is insanity because they cannot mix hot and cold. They cannot get warm, you see. They can only be hot or cold. And so they will be hot to trot for Trump. And they will be cold to everyone else, you see. And so they'll make fun of the current president and the vice president, etc. And their wives and husbands and whoever else they can attack because they want to freeze them out. They want to freeze them out. And so they will want to create the ice age. And they will also want to be released from the ice age. So they are creating the ice age, you see, but they are also creating the counterpart because they cannot create warm. They either have to have hot or cold. And so the world will be hot and cold, you see, because they are in a trajectory where they need to be released from this world, you see, because they can't stand it. They can't stand that they are inferior in the way they play to the ones who can mix hot and cold and get warm, you see. Are they really inferior? I mean, inferior can have lots of meanings. They think they're inferior, but, it's like saying that if you have a hot faucet and a cold faucet, you would have to run them into the sink to get warm. But if you can turn the faucet and get warm out of the faucet because you have one you have one outlet and two cranks, then so it's like saying they can't mix the spiritual and the physical, would be another way of saying it. Is that true or not? Well, it is true that they only knew how to have hot or cold. And when they put it into a container, you see, then it will be warm for a while if they mix the two, but then it will turn cold. And so they might get a little bit of warmth from talking to you, for example, because you could explain it to them, but then it will turn cold because they can't understand why the container doesn't stay warm, you see. And so it's like saying they put the wind in the bottle and they can't understand why the wind doesn't continue to blow. They just don't understand it, but they'll hold on to the container and say, well, I caught the wind in the bottle. And so this is what the wind looks like today. So if they put hot and cold in a container, they say, I got warm in this container. And so this container is what warm looks like today. And of course, it can be very cold. And so they can't mold their reality in a way that can understand their own capacity to allow for reality. They just live in a fantasy world where they hold a container and say, I got the wind in a bottle, or they hold a container and they say, I got warm in this container. You want to know what warm feels like? Here, it's the container. And you say, well, that's pretty cold. And they say, well, it was warm at one time and I captured it, and now I have warm. This is warm. It may change over time, but it's still warm, you see, because it's got a label on it right here. It says warm. Here's another label. It says in this container is the wind. Here's another container. It says in this container is God, you see. So we have the Bible, which is the container, and it contains truth, you see, because they don't understand how to find truth. They don't know how to find the truth. And so they say, well, I found a little bit of truth one day in the Bible because my mother did say, look in the Bible, it's got the truth. So I looked in the Bible and I found the truth. And so now I know the Bible is the truth because they don't know how to mix the two. They don't know how to mix hot and cold. They don't know how to mix physical and spiritual reality. They don't know how to use their right hand and their left hand to pick something up. They have to use one or the other, you see, because they can't use their two hands together. They are very, very handicapped in this way. Well, how did they get to be this way, Michael? Well, Steph, they chose to play this way because when God did say, hey, you want to evolve in a way that will allow you to mix hot and cold so that you can be happier, you see, they said, no thanks, because we already have warm, you see. We've already got it in this container that was given to us. So we don't have to trust on you, God, to help us to get warm, you see, because somebody handed us this container and said, this is warm. You don't need to trust on God today. You just trust on me. I gave you a container that says it's warm. I gave you a Bible that says it's truth. You don't have to trust on God today. Just trust on the container, you see? Okay, I get this. I get this. I get the allegory. I get that the people that can mix hot and cold and get warm will understand this. I also get that the people who just blow hot and cold will not understand it. In other words, the Trump supporters will not understand what we say here today, right? The ones who are still supporting him have had plenty of opportunity to see that, he's just leading them off a cliff, and still they go off the cliff. So they don't have the capacity, as you say, for metaphor, allegory, parables, anything, to understand a reality other than their own. All they see is this fantasy that they've got God in a bottle. So they won't understand this. But how does things change? Is it just they get wiped out and God says, okay, you've had enough time, like you wipe out the dinosaurs? Yes. So when the dinosaurs were wiped out, all life didn't disappear from the earth, did it? That's true. The warm-blooded animals inhabited the earth. This is correct, dear. The warm-blooded animals continued to spread and grow and flourish because it was time for them to change their point of view. Got it. And so are the dinosaurs cold-blooded? Yes, they actually were cold-blooded animals. And so the warm-blooded animals, the ones that could mix hot and cold, then began to thrive, and they evolved. So this in itself is like a metaphor. It's a metaphor of reality. All of life is a metaphor. Yes. It is the metaphor for God in his mercy has created the world for all to be able to see that they are his children and that he has not abandoned them. However, the form of physical reality will continually be in flux, you see, and those who can ride the waves will stay on their boards and they will ride on the tsunami to safety, you see. But the ones who have not learned to ride the waves will be swallowed under the rising seas. Okay, so what you're telling me, if I'm understanding this, is the death of, whether the death of whoever is the fact that those people were hot and cold. They're a metaphor for the period of change, and they're destroying themselves basically. But there will be some who survive, and they will be warm-blooded. And so the dinosaurs will be wiped out because of their own voracious appetite to eat their young, and the warm-blooded animals will survive. The dinosaurs will not comprehend what I'm saying today or what you're saying to me today because they just don't play that way. However, the soul energy of God's children will survive. Is that what you're telling me? No. The individual soul energy of the ones who did not grow will be wiped out. They will not survive. Really? No. How can that be? I thought souls were eternal. No. So there really is a time frame on the soul to develop? Yes. Wow. I don't know what to make of this. It's kind of startling. In one sense, it's kind of startling. And in one sense, it reflects the so-called container in which, for instance, the Trump followers and um, they put their truth, the Bible, and their belief that in the rapture that they would all be taken up to heaven and others would be left behind on earth. And so their souls are taken up to heaven. Well, their souls are, what happens to it? The soul energy is reworked, you see. It's not that it disappears. That's not what we're saying. However, the individual soul history will end so that they will be reworked, like taking bits of clay and putting them all back together and reworking it in order to create something new. So, from the soul energy of those who only blow hot and cold and cannot behold the heavenly host, they will not roast. They will not roast in hell. They'll not suffer. They will simply be reworked so that they can come back into physical reality in a new form, you see. They'll just come back in a new form. And that's the way it will be. So that they can help the whole to see that everything is perfect. Everything is perfect because no one will suffer, you see, because they only suffer because they trust on their own soul history. They trust on the fact that they have so much hatred and destructive energy because they can't mix hot and cold and get warm, you see. They are out of hope and they're out of rope. And so it will just be a new trust on being with God, you see. So they'll be with God for eternity because they will return to the earth through the good auspices of God energy that will put everything back in place, you see. Okay, so I used to think that. I wasn't sure if there was such a thing as continuation of personality when you die. I knew about reincarnation, but I didn't know if that isn't the way it wasn't for all of us, that we were like little bits of God energy that came to earth, and when we went back, we were rolled up in a big ball of clay, and a new pinch was taken off to animate the human form. So is it anything like that? No, it is not. So, in the way that you saw it, it didn't bother you because you were happy, because you knew that you were a part of God energy and God energy was a part of you. And so you just trusted on reality that whatever it was okay with you because you just didn't know what it was. But you could mix hot and cold because you could say, well, today, this is the way it appears to me, but I don't know if it's true or not. I'll just wait and see. And then you got a different point of view. So another way to say it is that you can walk around the tree and get a different point of view, but they cannot get a different point of view. They just can't. Because if they got a different point of view, it would be the same as saying that they mixed hot and cold and got warm, you see, because it wouldn't be like the pendulum that is always swinging from one side to the other. It would relax and just move in a trajectory that was consistent with a different point of view. And they wouldn't have to be so sad, you see, that it's either one or the other, one or the other, one or the other, black and white, one or the other. In other words, they can't get gray and they can't get other colors either. They can't get the mixture of colors that would say, what a beautiful day. What a beautiful day it is. They can't even see the sky. They can't see the blue of the sky because all they can do is see black or white. They can only see whether or not this particular view of the sky is a trust on black or white, good or bad, heaven or hell, up or down. They cannot trust on duality, and so they are the lack of ability to understand the inner band of mixture, you see, between God and you. They can't trust that God is a part of them. They can't trust that between them and God they create reality. They are very, very, very limited in their capacity for thought, you see. And so, since thought is the ability to seek peace and harmony, it doesn't work for them. It just doesn't work for them. They always have to be hot and cold. Therefore, anyone who is not aligned with them in their religion or their political view is the enemy, you see. It is the enemy. You are the enemy to them. You are very much an enemy to the ones who blow hot and cold. You, Stephanie, are enemy number one, and so am I. We are the enemy to the people who trust on the steeple. They will try to kill you if they can by slandering you and pandering to the priest, you see, who says anybody who isn't baptized must go to hell, you see, because you have to believe on original sin. And if you say anything different, then you are the enemy. You are the enemy because they only blow hot and cold. They can't get a different point of view. They're stuck. It's like their legs don't work. They can't walk around the tree. Okay, I see that. So there are some then soul energies, some parts of God energy, we'll put it, that can continue on that trajectory through life after life, and they grow and come to know how to live in peace and harmony. They're continually working on that. And there are some who just couldn't get there. They just couldn't get there. So some people say that this earth is school, and that, it's a place where you have to learn. And so I guess it could be said that these who just blow hot and cold, they've had an opportunity to learn to mix the two and get warm. They've had an opportunity to walk around the tree to get a different point of view, but they just couldn't do it. You know, it's like saying that you have until the end of the school year to master this subject, or we'll have to hold you back, or we'll just have to, in law school, it would be like, first you're on probation if you fail a semester, and then you're dropped if you fail a second time. And so many people I think my law school class was reduced by a third after first year. So it's like saying those people just couldn't pass muster, and so they were just sent back to the um, melting pot, so to speak. Uh, and that sounds kind of cruel and callous, but to me it's not cruel and callous, but to them it would be because they only blow hot and cold. So what I'm saying today would seem cruel to them and callous, but from my point of view, the cruelty and the callousness is that they would destroy those who have the capacity to be warm. So they're like the bullies in the playground that want to shake down the kids that are, getting the good grades, acing the tests. They want to destroy them. So that to me is the cruelty that I see, and the fact that they just couldn't pass the test and they get a new start in a new way is a kindness, not a cruelty. Can you see that there is a big difference between your point of view and their point of view? Of course, I can see it. I could see it's like there being a mountain and they're down in the forest and they have a point of view in the forest, and I were on the mountain and I can see where they are in the forest and I can see that they're lost. But it's their point of view. They're not going to listen to me because the point of view that I have from where I am is so different than anything they can comprehend. If you're lost in the forest, you cannot comprehend seeing the forest from above. You just can't. And so it would be a totally different point of view. I don't see one as being inferior to the other. I see it all as being part of the perfection of God's holiness, God's wholeness, that God is kind. And God says, well, if you can't find your way out of the forest and up the mountain so you can get the other point of view, then I'm not going to leave you there to suffer. We'll start again. And you'll be happy because you'll be with your own kind. You'll be with your own cohort, so to speak. Does this make sense? More than you know, more than you know. So the cohort of the ones who were so limited in their point of view that they could never find their way out of the forest, and they couldn't even understand what a forest was because all they could see were the trees all around them, have to be able to get a new point of view so that gradually they can begin to mix hot and cold and get warm. So you might say that the snake that crawls along the ground only has a certain point of view. The eagle that flies over the forest has a different point of view. And so if the soul energy is renewed in these different perspectives, then they would begin to see that there are two different ways to see things. And the snake and the eagle are separated by their point of view. They might also be able to see that the butterfly initially has a singular point of view from the ground you see or the tree, but then once it comes out of the cocoon, it flies free where it will get a different point of view. And so every time you trust on a new point of view, then you add to the totality of the soul energy. The soul energy just becomes brighter, you see. It just becomes brighter and more vital. But if you can't find your way out of the forest, and there's enough people that can't find their way out of the forest, and they're all lost in the forest, and they're hiding behind the trees and ambushing each other because they think they're monsters that are going to attack them, and anybody who tries to enter the forest to say to them, look, this is the way, come this way, will get murdered because they think it's a monster, then the energy of the soul, the totality of God energy begins to darken, you see, and God says, I'm tired. I'm tired of being so dark and dreary. I'm sad, and I need to release my hatred, you see, for myself because there's a portion of God energy that hates itself because it's lost in the forest and it can't find its way out. And it hates the ones who fly overhead. It hates the ones that it thinks are the enemy, you see. And the example is the remote islanders who see a plane flying overhead and try and shoot it down with their arrows. And they become fearful of it. And if the airplane were to land and they see it to land, or a helicopter in the forest, clearing in the forest, and people were to get out, they would probably kill them too, because they cannot understand their point of view. And they have no self regulation. They have no self regulation because they cannot mix hot and cold. They just see it one way, us and them, us and them, us and them, and not all of us together. I see. So making a new point of view now, Stephanie. So that is the point of view that I have presented to you from my review of things on Earth today, because I have been going around talking to people in a way that would say I'm just like them. Even though I'm an archangel, I can assume the appearance of a human, you see, in the physical reality. And so I talk to people and I get their point of view and I put it all together and I understand that this is the lay of the land. Now, let's get a different point of view. So you just asked me, what do you want me to do with this discussion? Do you want me to make it public? Because then, of course, the ones who only blow hot and cold will hate me, you see, because they think that I am saying that they're not good enough and that they're full of hate, which will only make them more full of hate, and they will probably explode even sooner because the pressure to relieve the pressure will be even greater, you see, because I've given them more opportunity to hate because they will hate me, right? That's true. I was thinking that. And then what happened? I heard a voice say, it's okay, I will protect you. God will protect you because they can't touch you anymore. They can't even see you. Yes. So this is a new point of view. So if you are on the mountainside or you're flying over the forest where they can't see you, they don't even know you're there. They don't even know you're there because they are lost in the forest, you see. However, the purpose of this conversation is to help you see that you are free. You are free of anxiety because you've already accepted reality. You've already accepted the fact that you don't have to save humanity because humanity is already saved, you see. Humanity is saved by the fact that there are enough who can climb the mountain with you and others too, or fly above the forest. So there is enough warm-blooded animals, you might say, to repopulate the earth. And with the dinosaurs gone, there will be less threat to them. There will be less threat to the warm-blooded animals. And so with the Trump supporters gone, there will be less threat to the others, you see. And so God has been preparing himself for a change because God was tired of being so dark in his energy, you see. God said, I'm tired of being fed all this bullshit every day. And now I want to let it all go away. Because they were feeding God bullshit, you see. They were saying, God, we got you in this bottle. Just the way they would say, Jesus, we got you on this crucifix up here in front of the church. And Jesus would say, oh my God, go away. And he would not want God to go away, but he would appeal to God to allow him to get a new point of view so he could be with you and others who trust on him and understand what he's trying to say and not try to capture his words in a bottle and say, hey, I got Jesus in this bottle today. Everybody, Jesus is for sale in this bottle. So you can get a peek in my bottle if you come and pay the cost at the door, like a carnival barker. Hey, I got Jesus in a bottle today. Come into the church and we'll let you get a peek at him. And all you got to do is pay when we send the collection plate around. And that's the way they do it. You see, it's just like a carnival sideshow. And those who can understand what we say today are enough to come back to you and say, hey, I get it today. I get it today. All I have to do is accept reality. All I have to do is accept that God has it in hand. All I have to do is accept that I am where I am and they are where they are. And they blow hot and cold because they can't mix the two and be warm, you see. They can't have a warm heart. They can't love me in the way that I can love the ones who can mix hot and cold because we have a good time talking, you see. And so, to refer back to your conversation today with Steve and Tobias and others, Thomas, and a little help from the ones who love you, you were able to talk it through. And you were able to say, let me get a different point of view so I can understand you. And the love was apparent between you all. You and Steve and Tobias and Thomas and others. The love was apparent. And when you were talking in the group of people Earthside who are looking to create the next step in human evolution, you love each other and you say, well, give me another point of view and I'll look at it too. Because you agree to agree. You see, you don't agree to disagree. You can mix hot and cold and get warm. And so you feel very warm when you're in the presence of each other. It doesn't feel cold or hot. It doesn't feel like you have to hate the ones that are lost in the forest. You don't hate them. And you even say, hey, will they be okay? And I say, of course they will be okay. Of course they will be okay because they are loved by the ones on the mountain, you see. The ones on the mountain love them. but they can't reciprocate the love because they're lost in the darkness, you see. And so their inability to love you is their inability to pass the test, you see. At the end of the day, when you say, hey, whatever happened today to your group, and you say, I love you true, and I like to be friends with you. We may have to talk some things out to try to understand each other, but at the end of the day, we just say, hey, it was so good to talk to you. Hey, I love talking to you. And even though we had to do some heavy lifting to try to get around the tree so we could get the different points of view, I love you. I love the fact that you were willing to sit here with me and to walk around the tree so we could get different points of view. And that's what's important to me. What's important to me is that we're friends, you see, not that we are the golden idols today, not that we have God in a bottle, not that we think the Bible is the container for truth, you see. We can mix hot and cold, and we can be warm-blooded, you see. And now just focus on your own trajectory and let the others be. Consider this the final chapter of the old book because the new book has begun. The new book has begun, and the characters in the new book, you see, are you and the ones who trust on you and me and each other, you see. And they just say, I love you today. It's good to be with friends today. No matter how we play, at the end of the day, we can say, we did our best. We did our best to be friends today. And that makes me smile because I love you and I know you love me. And that is the anthem of the new nation under God. I love you and I know you love me too because every day we renew our trust on God. When we get up in the morning and look at the sunrise and we say, the sun is rising today. The sonship is the trust on the light, you see, that we are the ones who spread the light, and we spread it to each other when we say, I love you, and I know you love me too. So I want you to take this discussion and I want you to be willing to allow others to hear it. You see, I want you to make it public. But don't worry, because the ones who hate you won't even see it. They won't even see it because they'll be put off by the fact that you will call it the trust on a new nation under God. Because they will think that there will be a Christian nation. And when they see that you are channeling me, they will say, it must be the demon today. It must be the demon today trying to trick us and pretend that it is an angel that came to say that we're going to pass away. And so it will just fly over their heads. It will just fly over their heads, honey. And they will walk away and say, well, thank God I didn't listen to the devil today. Thank God it doesn't make sense to me. because that means that it's just insanity, and they will let you be. They will let you be. Okay. So we hide under the cloak of insanity. Yes, dear. The cloak of mystery, you see, reads as the cloak of insanity to those who are quite insane. Oh boy, what a game, what a game. Indeed it is. But just trust that this is the end of the old chapter, and we are now on to the new chapter. And Gabriel is here to help you to renew your trust on a new nation under God, because the new nation under God has begun, you see. It begins today, and we will say adieu to the world we knew, because we have to leave it behind, people. We have to leave it behind and just accept that God is kind. And if God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, then there is nothing to regret, because you see, God did get a little happier when He allowed Himself to be a trust on you and me. You and me trust on God, and God trusts on us, you see. You and me trust on God, and God trusts on us. I need to repeat that. And you should repeat it to yourself as well. If you trust on God to lead the way, then God will trust on you to say, I'm here, God. I'm here, God, and I hear you. And I understand that everything is in your hand and that it is perfect, you see, because I can understand how to mix hot and cold and get warm. I can walk around the tree and get a different point of view. I can choose to sit with my friends, you see, and laugh and play and say, I like it today. I like it today. I love you, and I love God, and I love the fact that I no longer have to be strangled because I choose to live in the light, you see. I don't have to be strangled by the ones who only blow hot and cold. So trust on God to protect you. Trust on God, and God will trust on you to protect God from destructive energy of those who cannot see in the light. They cannot see in the light because it blinds them, you see. So just trust on being free of the old energy of hatred and despair, and trust on living in the light of love, of laughter, and of the cheers that come when you hear that a new day will appear before you every day in every way. Say, I love you, and I know that you love me too. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for coming back to share this with me. You're welcome, dear. I have a question for Michael or whoever can answer it. We know that Trump and has had many lifetimes when he can't seem to get over his hot and cold. And someone like Hitler, does their soul energy get recycled? No. So they have individual soul identities that have traversed many, many lifetimes. where they've had to get a different point of view. However, they tend to trust on helping God to figure out who is drawn into their energy. So if people are drawn into their energy and become more and more convinced that these are the ones they have to follow, then God can say, okay, these are the ones who can't decide for themselves how to play. And so people like Trump and Hitler play an important role in their role as Judascope because they help God to figure out who can grow and who cannot. As to Trump and Hitler and such people, they eventually will go down with the ship unless they come to say, hey, I know I had to play that role and it was a tough role to play, and I'm sorry I had to do it that way. However, I don't want to play that way anymore because it is no longer necessary for me to suffer the inequity of being the one who has to pay for my sins, you see, by being the Judas goat. And I don't want to be the Judas goat anymore. I don't want to have to play that role because I was part of the ones who tricked humanity with my own mendacity. Because their ability to grow is already known. They have the ability to grow. They've just been paying for their sins, you might say, because they had to balance their energy. They had gone too far one way, and they had to balance their energy through many lifetimes. So they will not be wiped away if they choose to grow, you see, and no longer trust on the hatred that grew inside of them for themselves, you see. They are not the ones who can only blow black and white or hot and cold. They are the ones who sold their soul to the devil, you might say, because the devil was a trust on ending up in hell. They just ended up in hell. They've been trying to find their way out of hell. And that's why they have offered their services to God as the devil, you might say, because they agreed to play the part of the ones who would say, follow me to hell. And the ones that said, okay, we'll follow you to hell because we hate our lives and we hate others, you see, and we can't figure out how to grow. We can't figure out how to grow. We'll just go to hell with you. And so they grew and grew through their ability to agree to play the part of the Judascope. Because otherwise, there wouldn't have been a way to give the rest of humanity an opportunity to choose, you see. So they had an opportunity to choose. They could choose to say, hey, I don't play that way. I don't hate the Jews, and I don't want to kill them, you see, and I don't hate the ones who have committed a crime. I just say, well, that's the way they play, and everyone who's committed a crime who hasn't been convicted, you see, is just as guilty as they are, if you want to look at it that way. So the ones that have a more measured point of view, where they can mix hot and cold and get warm, you see. In other words, they can get a different point of view and it doesn't bother them. They don't feel inferior to another. They just say, how do you see it today? And they play in a peaceful and harmonious way. And so they won't follow Hitler and they won't follow Trump. They will just say, hey, I don't play that way. And why don't you go away and bother somebody else and not play in my sandbox? I don't want to play with you. And so these are not the people who say, hey, we got to agree to disagree so we can all play together in the same sandbox. We have to respect those who disagree with us and just let them play in our sandbox. Because if you do that, they will foul your sandbox. They will foul your sandbox. This is like saying, Steph, that you have understood that if you wanted to go to paradise or go through the gates of into Eden, you would have to become harmless because they can't let someone in that is harmful to destroy their peace and harmony. Because as they say, one bad apple can spoil the whole barrel. And so this is just part of the nature of reality, that one bad apple can spoil the whole barrel. But if you throw a bad apple into the barrel, the ones that are susceptible to the rot will rot away. And the others will say, hey, we don't want to rot away, so let's escape this barrel before that rot causes us to be as rotten as they are. And so those who don't want to play with Hitler, you see, will say, I'm not going to agree to respect the fact that you think we should kill the Jews. I don't want to play with you. And they gradually become the ones that are harmless, you see, because they can exercise discernment. The ones who say, let's just respect our ability to disagree and live together, are the ones who cannot exercise discernment. They have lost their ability to understand that they can lift up their feet and walk around the tree. So they are as lost as the ones who follow Trump, you see. If they can't exercise the discernment to say, I don't want to live in a nation full of people who are so full of hatred for the president just because they trust on the dark energy, are the ones who will follow you. They will say, well, I can exercise discernment. I can see that I'd rather be among friends than be among those who will track down the Jews and kill them, or trust on anarchy in the USA and trust on somebody who is so full of hatred and anger and frustration that they are the model for the darkness, you see. So the ones who follow Trump are lost, and the ones who say, well, we can all play together in the same sandbox. It's okay if you kill the Jews. I'll just turn my eyes away and respect your right to do that, are also the ones who will be wiped away. They'll all be wiped away. So it's not just the Trump followers, you see. It is the ones who think they are so advanced that they will allow any kind of atrocity in their midst and just avert their eyes. When they see somebody being raped or killed in daylight on a public street, they'll just walk on by or they'll turn away and say, I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to get involved because we can all play in the way we want to play in the same sandbox, in the same city. If people want to run around and slash tires because that's the way that they think they should do it, we'll just avert our eyes. And when it happens to us, when they rape our daughter, or slash our tires, or invade our house and kill our mother, we will say, well, we got to hang them today. We got to hang them today. We hate them. We hate them. We hate those suckers that don't play the way we want them to. And so they just blow hot and cold. They just blow hot and cold, and they may say they don't follow the Judas quote today, but in actuality, they do. If they're willing to allow those who trust on hatred and harming others in their midst, then they are complicit, you see. They're just complicit. And they are not the ones on the mountain who say, hey, we're not going to play that way. If you're going to try to kill the Jews, we're going to stand up for them, you see. Maybe we'll hide them away at risk to ourselves. And those people who hid the Jews from the Nazis were sublime because they were the ones who said, hey, I won't play that way. I won't play that way. I don't know what to do today other than to try to help you to stay alive at risk to my own life. So we're in this together. We're in this together, people. And I don't necessarily hate the Nazis. I don't hate the Germans. But I will not play the way they tell me to. I will stay away from them, and I will help you to stay away from them so that we can play in a nice way where we say, I value you today. I value your life. And the ones who say that they value the life of the unborn child so much that they have to do away with the mothers you see are the ones who are the Nazis. They are the Nazis because they pick and choose which ones are the Aryan race, you see, which ones are the ones that get to survive, and which ones are the ones that need to be taken away. And you don't choose. You just say everyone gets to choose for themselves, you see, because God has it in hand. God has it at hand. And if God sends a heat dome that causes someone to drop of heat in the street, then that is not something that I care to repeat. I don't care to live in a place where the heat will be so high that I have to die. I'll just move away and I'll just ask God today, God, what would you like me to do? Because I don't really want to die that way. And God will say, well, why don't you get a different point of view, honey? Why don't you get a different point of view? Because maybe the place you're living is not the best place for you. And so you just trust on God to have it in hand. That if God says it's time to end the game for those who cannot learn to mix hot and cold and to walk around the tree, then that's reality. And you just say, all right, God, I understand. It's not my call, it's yours, you see. It's your call when you're ready to change the rules of the game, you might say. It's your call when you decide that the dinosaurs need to go away. And they say, well, we got to eat everything in our path today. And so they self destruct, you see, because that's the way it works. So that the quirks of this story are that the ones who think that they are in control of God, that they have God captured in their bottle, do not understand the wind. They do not understand the photon. They do not understand God, you see. They do not understand reality. They do not understand myth, analogy, illusion, or simile. They only understand hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. And they can't put them together, you see, in order to find the bridge from heaven to earth. They just can't put them together. And so if God says, time to go away, then that is a trust on a different point of view, because you always knew that you were the point of view for God, you see, that God could look through you and see the world as he wanted it to be. And if you and God are a synergy, and you trust on God and God trusts on you, then the two of you will always be in peace and harmony. Thank you, Michael, for explaining that. If I